Now that we have some understanding of what the World Wide Web is, we're very interested in learning about the World Wide Web, but in terms of web development, right? So in order for us to create web applications, we need to understand about web development technologies and how the internet works for us developers. So here's how web technologies and the internet work in the perspective of web development. So in web development, traditionally, we have web technologies, which means are the tools that we use to create websites, web pages. The basic web technologies are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. As you can see in this diagram here, we have the HTML, to the left here at the bottom. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So it's a language that allows us to create the markup of how our website, of how our page will look like. And the beauty of having HTML is that we can also use another web technology called CSS, stands for Cascading Style Sheets, which allows us to beautify, if you will, our pages. So if we want to change the colors of our HTML markup sections, we can use CSS to format and beautify our page. Additionally, we also have JavaScript, which is a programming language for the web. Of course, that's not just for the web anymore, but basically it started for the web that allows us to put together the CSS and HTML. Right, so these JavaScripts allowed us to get, for instance, if we wanted to get the H1 tag where it says my first heading in our HTML, we could actually retrieve that tag and do certain things, actions to it. For instance, if we want to make sure that when users tabbed a button which was created using HTML, we would use JavaScript for those actions to appear on the screen. Okay, so once we have our HTML created, our page created, the way things work with internet is that the browser is the one that knows how to read these HTML code in conjunction with CSS and JavaScript. So the browser would interpret all of those commands, all of those scripts, all of those HTML markup and CSS and JavaScript and know what to do with it. So think of a browser as a compiler per se, right? Compiles the code, understands it, and does something. So when you go to your browser and type in, for instance, www.google.com, what happens is your browser sends a request to a server somewhere, right, where the Google web page is hosted, right? And then response comes back if it's correct and then shows in the browser. So what's showing on the browser is going to be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the page that you ask, right? So that is how the web for us developers will work, right? You have to have your technologies, your HTML, CSS, and this is the front end of things. Of course, we have the back end where you can use Java, which is what we are going to be talking about in this section. But there are many other backend, they're called backend languages, that allow us to create full dynamic full stack applications. So we would have front end would be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, front end being something that users will see, and then we have the back end that deals with the logic, databases, and so forth. Okay, but the transaction between the browser, the server, and the front end, the HTML, the CSS, JavaScript is always like this. This is a traditional web development, right? Now, on top of everything, there are a lot of frameworks that pretty much abstract out this process here. Meaning, there are frameworks such as the one we're going to be looking at called Vaadin, will allow us to create web applications using straight Java. But what happens is when we write those Java components is that it's all compiled down by the Java virtual machine into, again, the basics, which will be the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript if needed. Okay? And the transactions are always the same, where we have the front end, the HTML, the browser reads it, and the server does all the work to pass in the information back to the browser so that users can see what they have asked for. All right? Okay, so you've had a very good basic introduction to web development and what the internet really is. And now let's go ahead and start looking a little bit deeper into the web development using Java. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.